Emily had always dreamed of working in a prestigious hospital, and St. Braden's was it. The old facility, built in the early 1900s, had a reputation that was both respected and feared. Its walls were lined with decades of history, and some whispered that the night shift nurses who disappeared never truly left. Emily didn't believe in ghost stories until her first night. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and something else, something metallic, faint but lingering. The corridors stretched endlessly, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed sporadically. She clutched her nurse's bag tightly, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. She was determined to prove herself, and nothing, not superstition, not the eerie whispers she thought she heard, would stop her. Her first patient check started routine. Mrs. Hargrove in room 2 was asleep, ventilator humming softly. Emily checked the IV lines, adjusted the monitors, and moved on. But as she passed room 7, the lights flickered violently, and the air turned icy. She swore she heard someone whisper her name. Emily paused, her hand hovering over the door. A shiver ran down her spine. Probably the AC, she muttered, but her stomach churned. By 2 a.m., the night felt alive in a way she couldn't explain. The hospital wasn't empty, it was aware. The faint sound of dragging footsteps echoed from the end of the east wing. Emily froze. No one should be there. She rounded the corner and saw nothing, yet the whispers grew louder, like a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. She went to the nurse's station. Some charts were missing. The phone rang with a shrill tone. When she picked up, only heavy breathing, then a soft giggle. Emily dropped the receiver. Her pulse raced and she pressed the panic button, but nothing happened. The system was dead. The shadows in the corners of the station seemed to stretch toward her. Her pager buzzed. It was a call from room 17. Emily had been warned about that room. The locals called it cursed, but she brushed it off as superstition. As she approached, the air grew colder. Frost formed on the edge of the door. She turned the knob and stepped in. Mr. Latham, a post-op patient, was supposed to be in bed. But the bed was empty. The heart monitor flatlined briefly, then resumed a slow, uneven beat. Emily's heart skipped. She scanned the room. The shadow first appeared in the corner, a tall humanoid figure, edges wavering like smoke, with no discernible face. Its presence was heavy, suffocating. The whisper returned, clear now. "You shouldn't be here." Emily tried to leave, but the door clicked shut. The room was closing in, shadows pressing at her back. She grabbed her phone for light, but the screen went black. The monitor beeped rapidly, its sound echoing in the small room. Then she saw it, writing in condensation on the window, as if drawn by invisible fingers. "Leave now, or stay forever." Panic surged. Emily used her emergency override keys to unlock the door. She stepped into the hall. A trail of black mist lingered along the corridor, moving like a living thing. The hospital felt alive, the floors creaking with unseen footsteps following her every move. Every patient room seemed to stare at her. Eyes in the darkness, glinting with malevolence, watched from the corners. By 3 a.m., Emily discovered something that made her blood run cold. Previous night shift nurses were missing, entire schedules wiped clean. No transfer records, no resignations, just gone. She tried calling the administration, but the lines were dead. Then she heard it over the PA system, a chorus of voices whispering, "Stay, stay, stay." She ran, shadows shifted, hallways twisted unnaturally. Every exit led her back to the ICU. The hospital had become a maze, trapping her. Equipment moved on its own. Gurneys rolled down empty corridors. Heart monitors beeped in distorted patterns. Figures appeared at the end of hallways, patients she had checked earlier, eyes glowing, mouths open in silent screams. Emily reached the surgical wing. The operating lights flickered. The shadow from room 17 appeared again, taller, its edges black smoke. A voice inside her head whispered, You belong here." Her legs moved on their own, carrying her to the blood-stained floor she didn't remember approaching. The shadow loomed, filling the hallway, moving faster, closing in. She stumbled into the storage closet, slamming the door. Dust and cobwebs covered her face. Through a crack, she saw the shadow's reflection in a mirror, its face a void sucking in all light. Then came the whispers, louder, layered with hundreds of voices screaming her name. Panic became terror. Her mind raced. This was no ordinary hospital, no mere superstition. Minutes felt like hours. Emily tried to calm herself, repeating over and over, "I am real. I am real. I am real." The shadow pressed against the closet door, silent now, but oppressive. She could feel it breathing her, studying her, feeding on her fear. Eventually, the shadow receded, drawn back into the walls like smoke retreating. The hallway straightened. The PA system was silent. The clock on the wall ticked normally. But Emily knew it wasn't gone, just waiting, watching, learning. She made her way back to the nurse's station. Every chart was back in its place. The monitors displayed normal readings. It was as if the night's horrors had never happened, except for the cold lingering on her skin, the whispers still faint in the edges of her mind. Emily sat at the desk, shaking, trying to make sense of what had occurred. The first night had been survived, but she knew, deep down, that St. Braden's would demand more. That night had only been an introduction. The hospital, alive and malevolent, was already planning its next move. She glanced at room 17 one last time. The lights flickered. A shadow passed the window, and in her mind a voice whispered, "You're ours now." By 4 a.m., Emily's nerves were frayed. The dim glow of the fluorescent lights seemed almost hostile, flickering in erratic patterns as if the building itself were breathing. Every step she took down the east wing echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls lined with peeling paint and decades-old patient records. The shadows she had first seen in room 17 were now more persistent, lingering at the corners of her vision, vanishing when she tried to focus on them. Her first task was a routine check of the ICU, but nothing felt routine anymore. As she approached room 22, a sudden draft chilled her spine. The monitor inside the room was dead, screen black, but she heard the faint beeping of a heart monitor. Curious and terrified, Emily stepped in. The room appeared empty, yet she felt the unmistakable weight of someone, or something, watching her. A whisper reached her ears, soft but insistent. "Emily." She spun around. The room was vacant. The bedsheets were undisturbed, yet when she turned back to the monitor, she froze. The screen displayed a face, hers. Pale, eyes wide with terror, mouth screaming silently. It was moving independently, mimicking her fear exactly. Emily recoiled, her heart pounding in her ears. The lights flickered violently. Shadows writhed on the walls, morphing into grotesque forms. Nurses she hadn't met, patients long dead, and twisted humanoid figures reaching for her. The whispers grew louder, layered voices overlapping, impossible to decipher, yet clearly saying, "Stay, stay, forever." Emily ran down the corridor. The hall seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting and bending, making familiar turns unfamiliar. Every door she passed rattled violently as if unseen hands were trying to pull her in. She entered the supply room to hide, slamming the door behind her. Dust swirled in the air. In the dim glow of her flashlight, she saw writing on the wall, drawn in what looked like blood. "You belong here now." Panic surged. She tried the door, it wouldn't budge. Behind her, a soft dragging noise approached. Emily pressed herself against a shelf, barely breathing. The shadows in the room coalesced into a tall figure, indistinct but undeniably human-shaped. It moved with deliberate, slow steps toward her, hands reaching. She felt the air thicken, her lungs struggling as if the room itself were suffocating her. With a desperate push, she managed to force the door open and ran down the hallway. The lights flickered again, and she glimpsed faces pressed against the glass of empty patient rooms. Eyes staring, mouths agape, as if screaming silently. Her own reflection appeared in a window, only her face was twisted, hollow-eyed, and smiling maliciously. Emily reached the stairwell, thinking she could escape to the ground floor. But the stairs seemed endless, spiraling downward into darkness. Each step made a hollow echo, repeating a dozen times. A hand, shadowy and elongated, shot out from the wall and grazed her arm. Pain, sharp, burning, flared, but when she looked, her skin was untouched. She realized this was no ordinary building. St. Braden's was alive, feeding on fear, warping reality around her. In the basement, she found the old morgue. The doors, once locked, swung open silently. Inside, the bodies were gone, but whispers filled the room, closer now, circling her. "Join us! Join us!" "Stay forever." Emily's flashlight flickered, and in the darkness she saw a nurse, pale and hollow-eyed, pointing at her. "You're next," the figure hissed. She ran again, bursting out of the basement into a long corridor she didn't recognize. The exit doors were gone, replaced with brick walls. Hallways stretched and twisted. Every room contained glimpses of terror, floating patients, shadow nurses, flickering monitors showing gruesome images, blood, twisted faces, screams frozen in time. By 5 a.m., Emily found herself in a familiar hallway, room 17. The bed was now occupied, but not by Mr. Latham. It was her. Her own body lay in bed, pale, eyes wide, frozen in terror. She screamed, but no sound came out. The shadow figure from the east wing appeared behind her reflection in the monitor. "You're ours now," it whispered, the voice layered with hundreds of others. Emily felt herself being pulled toward the reflection. Her body froze. Panic surged. The shadows extended, wrapping around her, invading her mind with images of eternal torment. Minutes, or was it hours, passed. When Emily finally awoke, she was sitting at the nurse's station. Everything seemed normal. Charts in place, monitors working, the night shift seemingly uneventful. But she knew it wasn't. The shadows were still out there, patient, waiting. And somewhere in room 17, her other self lay trapped, screaming silently. The first night had ended. But the East Wing had only begun to reveal its true horrors. Emily realized she was no longer just a nurse. She was prey, caught in a building that fed on fear, twisting time and space, and collecting souls one shift at a time. By 6 a.m., Emily's exhaustion was overwhelming. She had survived 2 nights in St. Braden's, yet the hospital's malevolent presence was far from over. The East Wing had revealed itself as a labyrinth, twisting and warping around her, with shadows that seemed to have minds of their own. Each hallway led to a nightmare, each door hiding horrors beyond comprehension. She entered the surgical wing, hoping for a familiar path, but the lights flickered violently. The operating tables were empty, yet instruments floated mid-air, slicing the air with metallic clinks. A monitor displayed an unfamiliar patient code, Emily's own ID. Her name scrolled across the screen with an alarming red warning, "Active." Suddenly, the shadow appeared again, taller and more defined than before. It moved with purpose, its edges no longer smoke but solid, defined, grotesque in its humanoid shape. Its presence filled the entire corridor, crushing her senses with its cold, oppressive aura. Emily felt her heartbeat echoing like a drum, each beat feeding the entity's power. The voice in her mind returned, louder now, layered with dozens of screaming souls. "Join us forever. Your body, your mind, ours." The whispers turned into guttural roars that made her ears bleed. Emily stumbled back, crashing into a wall. The paint bubbled under her touch, sticky and warm, as if alive. She ran blindly, entering room 22 once again. The bed was empty, but on the floor she saw footprints glowing faintly, Each step left a mark that burned the floor as if branded by fire. Following them, she reached the old nurse's lounge. Dust covered the furniture, but a faintly glowing journal sat on the table. She opened it, pages covered in frantic handwriting. Diagrams of shadows, warnings, and rituals to contain the entity. Suddenly, the shadows condensed into multiple figures, each resembling a nurse from decades past. Their eyes hollow, their mouths stitched shut. They advanced toward her, dragging their feet across the floor, leaving black streaks in their wake. Emily read the journal aloud, hoping the incantation within could protect her. The figures halted, shrieking as invisible force pushed them back. A cold, whispering wind swirled through the room, extinguishing lights and plunging her into darkness. In the faint glow of her phone, she saw it, the entity, floating above her, its face a void of endless darkness, hundreds of eyes blinking in the void. "You cannot escape. You are ours," it hissed. Emily's instincts took over. She ran to the basement again, seeking the morgue. The entity followed, passing through walls, doors, and ceilings with fluid, terrifying motion. The morgue doors slammed shut, and the shadows coalesced into a wall of dark, pulsating mass. The whispers now formed words she could understand. "Surrender your body. Surrender your mind. Join the night." She backed away, tripping over crates, stumbling into the cold, dark hallways she barely recognized. Every exit led her back to room 17. Her body in the bed, pale, frozen in terror, stared at her with eyes wide open. Emily realized she wasn't alone. Her other self was a prisoner of the entity. The shadow lunged. Emily screamed, but her voice echoed back at her in distorted, horrifying ways. The room stretched, walls bending and twisting like taffy. Figures of patients, nurses, and unrecognizable shapes reached for her. Each touch sent waves of agony through her mind. Visions of her worst fears, memories distorted into grotesque nightmares. Desperate, she grabbed the journal, chanting the incantation with every ounce of strength. The entity shrieked, recoil shaking the entire wing. The walls shook, debris falling around her. Black mist swirled violently, forming a vortex that threatened to engulf her. Emily's voice rose, stronger and louder with each word. The shadow faltered, pulling back into the walls as the ritual forced it into containment. By 7 a.m., the corridor returned to a semblance of normalcy. Equipment was in place, monitors functioned correctly, and the shadows had retreated into the walls. Emily was breathing heavily, sweat and blood trickling down her face, her hands shaking as she clutched the journal. She glanced at room 17. Her other self was gone, the bed empty. But a faint whisper lingered. "You cannot leave. The night belongs to us." Emily understood the truth. The hospital was alive, feeding on fear, twisting reality, and collecting souls. She was trapped in a place where time had no meaning. Every night a new horror, every shadow a potential trap. And the entity wasn't defeated. It was learning, adapting, waiting for the right moment to strike again. She walked to the nurse's station, exhausted but alert. The lights flickered one last time. She knew the coming night would be worse. The East Wing had revealed only a fraction of its horrors. And Emily, unwilling but forced to survive, prepared herself for the next shift, knowing that each hour in St. Braden's was a battle for her soul. By 8 p.m., Emily was mentally and physically drained. The hospital no longer felt like a place of healing. It was a predator, and she was its prey. The East Wing had revealed only a fragment of its malevolent nature. Now Emily knew she had to confront the source, the heart of St. Braden's darkness. The corridors seemed alive, twisting and expanding. Every shadow moved independently, watching her, whispering her name, warning her, tempting her. She clutched the journal tightly, feeling its warmth pulsing as if alive. Each page contained instructions, rituals, and warnings, left by nurses and staff who had survived longer than most. Some hadn't, Emily approached the surgical wing, now distorted beyond recognition. The operating tables were stacked, floating in midair. Medical instruments hovered and rotated, slicing the air with metallic echoes. The monitors showed patient names, but they weren't real. They were snapshots of people she had never met. Victims trapped by the hospital over decades. Suddenly, the shadow appeared again. Taller, more defined, its presence oppressive. It whispered promises of power and knowledge, attempting to seduce Emily into surrendering. "Give yourself to the night. Join us, forever." The voice was a chorus of hundreds, overlapping and unending. Emily forced herself to focus on the ritual in the journal. Step by step, she chanted the incantation, each word a weapon against the shadows. The entity screamed, a sound that seemed to shatter the hospital walls. Shadows shrieked, writhed, and lunged at her. But the ritual formed a protective barrier around her. She reached the central hallway, where the hospital's heart pulsed, a massive, shadowy vortex above the floor, swirling with faces of the lost, hands reaching out, mouths screaming silently. The darkness throbbed with malevolent energy, attempting to pull her in. Emily felt her strength wavering, the whispers clawing at her mind, promising oblivion. With determination, she recited the incantation louder, focusing on the vortex. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently as the ritual began to contain the darkness. Figures of lost nurses, patients, and grotesque forms were pulled into the center, trapped within the barrier. Emily's vision blurred, the weight of centuries of fear pressing down on her. One final surge of energy erupted. The vortex convulsed, the shadows screamed, and then silence. The darkness contracted into a single point, then vanished. The corridors returned to normal, or as close to normal as they ever were. Emily was breathing heavily, drenched in sweat, her hands shaking, but the hospital was still alive. She could feel it in the walls, in the air, in the floor beneath her feet. The shadows had been contained, but not destroyed. Somewhere, deep within the heart of St. Braden's, the entity waited, patient, hungry, planning its return. Emily approached room 17, the epicenter of the nightmare. The bed was empty. She knew the entity had retreated, but she also knew it would return. Her own reflection in the window stared back at her, hollow-eyed, pale, a silent reminder of the terror she had faced. The chapter ends with Emily sitting at the nurse's station, exhausted but vigilant. She understands that surviving St. Braden's is not enough. The hospital feeds on fear, and she must remain alert, ready for the next night shift, the next wave of horrors. The whispers may be gone, but the shadow of the night remains. The clock struck midnight. Emily felt every nerve in her body screaming in protest, yet she had no choice. The hospital demanded her presence. St. Braden's was alive, and it hungered for the night shift's fear, weaving nightmares into reality. She approached room 17, the epicenter of the entity's power. The hallway stretched unnaturally, shadows shifting as if alive. Her own reflection in the cracked windows stared back at her, pale, hollow-eyed, whispering, "Stay. Forever." The journal in her hands vibrated faintly, pulsating like a heartbeat. Each page contained rituals, warnings, and hints left by the nurses who had vanished before her. The words seemed to glow, giving her courage as she recited them under her breath. Suddenly, the entity emerged fully, towering, humanoid, its edges a writhing mass of darkness. Hundreds of faces appeared within its form, screaming, whispering, and clawing at Emily's mind. The hospital shook violently as if reacting to its master's anger. Equipment floated, instruments clattered, and monitors displayed grotesque images of trapped souls. "You cannot leave." The entity's voice thundered inside her head, layered with the screams of centuries. "You belong here with us. Forever." Emily ran, clutching the journal. Hallways twisted and bent, leading her in circles. Each room presented horrors. Nurses with hollow eyes, patients frozen in silent screams, shadowy hands reaching from walls, floors collapsing into darkness. The hospital's energy was overwhelming, attempting to crush her will. Reaching the basement, she entered the morgue. The entity followed effortlessly, passing through walls, floors, and ceilings. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with the stench of decay and fear. Emily felt her mind fraying, visions of her own death flashing relentlessly. She stumbled across the floor, but her determination did not waver. She set the journal down in the center of the room and began the final incantation. Her voice rose, shaking the walls with each word. The entity screeched, a sound that tore through reality. Shadows of lost nurses and patients were pulled into the vortex of the ritual. The hospital groaned, the building itself resisting the magic. But Emily continued, pouring every ounce of courage and will into the spell. The entity lunged at her, cold and suffocating, but Emily held her ground. With one final scream, she completed the incantation. The entity convulsed, its form unraveling, faces screaming as it was forced back into a single solid point. The shadows shrieked and twisted violently, then were gone. Silence enveloped the hospital. Emily collapsed, exhausted. The corridors returned to near normal, but the knowledge lingered. The entity was contained, not destroyed. Somewhere deep in the walls it waited, patient, ready to strike again. She approached room 17. Her other self, the Emily trapped within the hospital's nightmare, was gone. The bed was empty, yet a whisper floated on the wind. The night never ends. We wait. Chapter 5 ends with Emily sitting at the nurse's station, journal in hand, alert and wary. She survived, but St. Braden's hunger never ceases. The hospital feeds on fear, shadows move in the corners, and every night is a battle for survival.